Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending our spring series of webinars that we are holding here. My name is Godfrey Rivera. I'm with the Metropolitan Parent Center of Synergia. Synergia is a community-based nonprofit organization. We've been around since the late 70s. Our office is in Uptown Manhattan, and we offer services, supports, housing, a number of services to parents who have individuals with disabilities in their care. I am one of the principal parent trainer at Synergia, so I'm in charge of doing workshops and currently webinars to give parents information about issues of interest and concern to them. I am joined by my friend and colleague, Doris Rodriguez. She is one of our advocates at the Metropolitan Parent Center, and one of her main roles is to work one-to-one with parents to inform them about issues relating to child's resources and to help them resolve issues that they have with the school, with the programs, et cetera, et cetera. Today, we are going to be discussing a very important part of what every parent that has a child or youth with disability has to be aware of and become a part of. I am addressing, pardon me, I apologize for that. I'm addressing the evaluation and classification process. What we want parents to know is that, first of all, you have a right to be involved in everything that involves your child's education, including special education services. And we want parents to be aware that they have rights. I discussed those rights in a prior webinar a week or so ago. And what we want parents to do is to develop an understanding for these processes so they can become members of the team. Many of us are familiar with the IEP process that we have for our children, which is a very important component of their education. But we tell parents, too, that you also should be aware of the evaluation process. How did your child get to be classified with whatever the disability category was that he or she was given by the evaluation team? So we're going to talk about those issues today to give you an understanding of what what involves to be what I would like you to be called effective advocates for your children. You will hear me repeat a couple of themes throughout the presentation, and the one that I want to start with now is the one that says that you are an expert about your child. You will always know him or her better than I do. Despite the fact that we have conversations, I go through the reports and the evaluations and all that, parents need to understand that they possess very important and critical knowledge that the other members of the team should be aware of when we are discussing your child's needs and how to address them. Yes, you're a member of that team. You're a member of the IEP team, which is usually the same individuals that were involved in conducting the evaluation. So another thing that I will repeat is that you need to understand what your rights are and how to use them. You should be able to go to an IEP meeting and have an understanding of what we're going to talk about because you have an understanding of your child's disability, which is another important theme. Parents need to know what those labels mean. What is autism? What is a learning disability? What is maybe a hearing issue? In order to be able to understand what the team is discussing and then to be able to ask lots and lots of questions and to be able to agree with what the team is recommending or not to agree because you need to have clarifications or more explanations of what the team is about. So hopefully this conversation today will help you develop that understanding in order for you to become what we would like you to be known as effective advocates for your children. Please give me a moment, please. We're good now. All right. So here is our first screen. I just want you to know that the name of our agency, but more importantly, with the Metropolitan Parent Center, and right below that is our website address, synergia ny.org. You can always log on to that, so you can visit our website, and in particular, visit our calendar that lists all the events that we'll be offering throughout the month of May and in the future that you may want to be aware of and participate in. Okay, let's do that. All right. So before we formally start, I want you to be aware of these few points. Uh, First of all, the discussion that we will be engaging today is focusing exclusively on the evaluation process. It's, it has a lot of components to it, so we need to keep focused on the evaluation piece. As you know, you will be muted throughout the conversation. However, if you have any questions or comments to make, please note that we will address those comments. That's what one of Doris's tasks will be. She will be looking at the chat box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. I think it's on the right-hand side, where you can record your comments or your questions. At the end of the presentation, there will be around 15 or 20 minutes left dedicated to responding to your questions and comments. At the end, Doris will read your questions or comments, and I'll be able to respond to them. So please just type your questions or comments in the question box that you'll see at the bottom right of the screen. And finally, at the end of the webinar, the last slide here will tell you how to link in to a survey link where you can express your comments about the information that you have been witnessing to. And we appreciate your comments. They help a lot in determining future events for parents. All right. So here's what we're going to talk about for this session. We're going to look at seeking answers regarding concerns if a child may have a disability. That is a very important question because many parents may not possess knowledge of the fact that there may be a disability that they need to be aware of. Many parents that we've spoken to throughout the years says, yeah, I was kind of concerned, but I wasn't sure what was happening with my child, the fact that he still wasn't walking or being able to stand upright on two legs and walk forward until he was like 4 years old. I just thought that was the way it was, that he would eventually walk, talk, eat, whatever when he was ready to do that. So that's already an issue that we need to address. Another thing that I'm going to be discussing is about this. I'm going to describe the process that helps to determine if a child does indeed have a disability and to identify how we deal with that information. After we do the evaluation, what disability category will best serve your child's needs? And also, we're going to look at some of the services and supports to help the child learn and develop skills that are important for him or her to obtain an appropriate education in the city. So the question that we want you to be aware of is when a child is having trouble in school, it's important to find out why. There are a lot of issues that may cause our children to develop or demonstrate problems with learning. Some of them are as basic as they are new to this country. They may not speak the English language, or they have not been in a classroom that they've never seen before. So it's for a lot of students, it's new. It's just new, and they're a little bit nervous, fearful about this environment. And after a while, they seem to settle down and understand how to participate in the learning process. However, sometimes a parent may, reading off the screen here, parents may notice that their child is not developing skills at the same rate as other children or struggling in certain areas of learning in the school. Okay, that means that the parent may be aware that that little girl who's already in second grade is having a lot of trouble writing her name underlined on a piece of paper. She's not sure about the spelling or the order of the letters, or that the Some letters may be facing the wrong direction. These are all cues and clues that the child may have a learning issue. So at that point, we recommend that parents start to consider the possibility that there may be a disability that needs to be investigated. So, however, before a child can receive any kind of special education or related services for the first time, a full and individualized initial evaluation of the child must be conducted to see if the child indeed has a disability and is eligible for special education. Special education is not something that is just offered or available just like that. There is a process that parents need to engage, that they need to be aware of and be a part of in order to make sure that their child gets necessary and appropriate services. So at the very beginning, parents will be given a document that explains the evaluation process, their rights, and the need for them to sign to give written consent before the evaluation can be conducted. The formal evaluation cannot be conducted until the parent provides his or her written consent. And why is this evaluation necessary? The evaluation or evaluations are used to find the reasons why a child is having trouble in school and looks at why he or she is struggling, with the work, falling behind with the schoolwork, and also demonstrating behavior issues, communication, or language issues. Let me say another thing about that, the behavior piece. Sometimes when a child is struggling with the classwork or falling behind, at that point, he or she will start to demonstrate behaviors, frustration, anger, because they are not able to keep up. They'll start feeling that they're being left behind, and they, being children or teenagers, don't know how to deal with that, and there may be some acting out behavior that results as a reason for that. Communication issues I mentioned in a sense, if it's a language issue or another, and I'll address these in more detail later on in the presentation. Also, the evaluation is necessary to gather information that will help determine the child's educational needs. It's really important that we get information from numbers of sources before we can talk about what resources or supports that student will need. And also to guide decision making about appropriate educational programming for the child. Okay, so the evaluation is intended to answer these three basic questions. Does the child have a disability that requires the provision of special education and related services? Yes or no? So that's the very first thing that the evaluation team must examine and determine. Does the child have a disability? Yes or no? After that, we need to consider what is the nature of the disability? What is the specific disability that we are looking at, and that help determine what the child's specific educational needs are. So, if the child is considered to be autistic, what does that mean? What kind of services and supports will he or she require in order to be able to go to school and benefit from receiving an education? So another thing is that we want parents to be aware of that the child must be evaluated in all areas of suspected disability categories, in all areas of concern, in other words. So I mentioned the example of a child that may not be able to write his or her name on the line. It's already in second grade, or something about the posture, the gait of the walk. Parents, because they raise their children and are with them 24 hours a day, they're able to observe actions and behaviors, some of them that might give them cause to be concerned. So we tell parents that please, observe your children and see how they line up with other people, with other friends, other parents that have children of similar age. And if you notice there's something of a discrepancy there, you should want to investigate it as soon as possible. So, mom is concerned that the girl is throwing tantrums when she's in the bedroom, in the bed. Why is she throwing a tantrum in the bed? So she could, make an inquiry, and we need to investigate issues like that. And number three on the page here says, what after we determine that the child has a disability and have an idea of what her needs are, we need to talk about what are the specific special education services and related services are appropriate for addressing those needs. At this point, according to the law IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the evaluation team must identify at least one disability category before special education and related services can be provided. There's no way that a child we can produce an IEP for a child without indicating a specific disability. At the end of the presentation, you'll see a list of the 13 disability categories that are recognized by the Office of Special Education Programs, which is part of the Federal Department of Education in Washington, D.C. Okay, one point I want you to be aware of, everything that is broken, that is mentioned up here in this evaluation, in this presentation, is derived from information derived from the IDEA law. When I did the presentation on parents' rights, the main focus was on parents becoming aware of the federal law, which is called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and how that act explains what parents' rights are in terms of becoming that effective advocate that I mentioned, and of being able to work with the school team to help the child receive necessary and appropriate services. You notice I keep repeating the phrase necessary and appropriate services because that's the language that IDEA uses over and over again to ensure that the child has services that will meet his or her needs. Okay, over here in the first bullet, it says that IDEA says that the school district has 60 days, and I forgot to include the word calendar days. So please make a note of that. Has 60 calendar days to initiate and complete both the evaluation and IEP development processes. Okay, that's important to know. There's a reason for that. I don't want to get into that because that's little bit of IDEA history. But once the parent has authorized that the evaluation will be done, a timer goes off. And over here it says that the school district has 60 days. That means that the first 30 days, the first 30 calendar days, the school district has to conduct and complete the evaluation. So that's about a month. 30 calendar days are about a month. Depending on what time of the month the parent authorizes the evaluation, that's when that timer starts ticking. And then IDEA says that the school also will have to develop the IEP right after the evaluation process has been done. Over here, the first bullet it states that there are some states that have shortened this process to 30 or 45 days. Every state has their own way of implementing the IDEA law, but they still have to implement the heart of the law, which means that we need to do the evaluation and also then design the IEP for the child within that 60-day time limit. As it works out, most states in the U.S. follow the policy of 60 days to conduct both the evaluation and then they develop the IEP program for him or her. Okay, once the child has been evaluated, the school district has 30 calendar days to develop and initiate an IEP. That's a lot of work, and I hope some of you have had experiences working with the IEP team because once again, you are a member of that team. You have every right to participate in that team. I tell parents that parents consider themselves expert about their children. You're raising them. You know their likes. You know what sets off what triggers their behaviors. You know everything the rest of the team needs to be aware of it. You're the expert on your child, and IEP team members are expert about the resources, placements, and other things that will support your child. Okay, so once again, the school district has 30 calendar days to develop and initiate the IEP, and that's why it is essential to put your request in writing as soon as you think you might want to do this for your child. That means explore the fact if she or he has a disability and will require special education and supports. However, the third bullet is interesting. Um, um, our center is in New York City, so we have the New York City Department of Education to relate to. However, parents and the school district can agree to another timeline if the family has moved from one school district to a new one. Okay, so let's assume that the family's grown and they needed a bigger apartment, and they moved. They were living in a specific area in Queens. Let's talk about Flushing, Queens. But now they found a bigger apartment in Washington Heights in New York City. Uh, we tell parents that even though school districts are part of the Department of Education, many of them have access to specific or special resources that may not be found in other school districts. That's why we tell parents to ask about the resources that are available to help their children when we are conducting both the evaluation and the IEP process. So we can reset the time clock to deal with the fact that the family moved from one area, one school district to another school district in New York City, and that will make sure that the school district, the new one, will be able to comply with the IDEA rule that they have to.
Godfrey, we can't hear you. Mr. Rivera. Mr. Rivera. We apologize. Give us 1 second, guys.
Excuse me.
Yes, we hear
Uh
you
huh.
now.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. So the aptitude and achievement test are the tests that every student in the school system takes in order to determine things about IQ, learning styles, et cetera, that are important. So we need to look at that information too. Uh, of course, your input is key. As I said before, you are raising this very special person, and you possess very special and unique information that the team should hear about. One of the things that we recommend to parents is that do not just address his or her needs, issues, problems, etc. We need to hear things that animate your child. What makes her happy? What makes her smile? Does she like to paint, draw, dance, cook? We need to hear information about positive things that will help us design uh, a plan, a schedule that meets his or her needs more appropriately. Another source of information are your child's teachers. They are in a really good position to inform you how your child is doing in the classroom. Uh, they're doing really good. They're keeping up with the class. They're reading, writing at grade level, etc. Or they are not. They will be able to tell you that your child is struggling with reading, writing, math, or whatever other classroom issue is being discussed. And then she should also inform you that you have a right to request an education from the school. Just go to the school. I usually tell parents to talk with the parent coordinator at the school, the teacher, even the principal to get information about how to request an evaluation, which is free of charge to the parent. We also look at your child's doctor's report, his or her, regarding your child's physical health. That includes weight, height, um, vision, all those tests that we have our children take typically um, to get that information about your child. Is your child very skinny? Is he or she obese? That's important information that the team needs to be aware of in order to make determinations later on. Uh, Another point that it's very interesting, and in cities like New York City, it's kind of a very also important. Is social and cultural information about not just the child but the family. As you know, and New York City is a very, very diverse community. It has people from all over the world that come here to live, raise a family, develop careers, and all that. So, because New York City is such a diverse community of populations, we need to be aware of specific cultural and social understandings that the family has. One very quick example uh, is that parents, uh, the IEP team, excuse me, the evaluation team should have an understanding of what parents' understanding is of what life is like in New York City. The family may come from an agrarian, agricultural culture where even being in the classroom is something is that they have back at their home country. So it all has an effect about how people address and think about uh, here in New York City. I also tell parents that they need to be aware of the American culture, the dominant culture, and compare it to their particular needs and understandings and beliefs. We need to understand how a family's practices dinner. Do they sit around a table and chat about the day's events, or how does a family get together to practice dinner, or what are the rites and rituals that parents use to put their children to sleep when they're very young? They're very different according to what part of the world they come from. So these are some examples what we mean by having an understanding of social and cultural information. The next bullet talks about something called understanding child's adaptive behaviors. Now, once again, briefly, adaptive behaviors are what we call age-appropriate behaviors that people, including children, need to not only live independently and function well, but how do they navigate a day in their life? What does that child do when mom says, "Get up, you get ready for school"? What does that do? Bathroom rights, getting dressed, breakfast. Uh, we need to understand how a child manages these behaviors. Do they have trouble holding that spoon when they're eating? Do they get food all over the table? Do they understand what what that light means at the corner when it changes from red to green? We need to have understanding of our child get through one day in their life in order to make more specific determinations about their needs. And of course, information from all sources must be documented. Uh, you have a right, according to IDA, to request any documentation that is that pertains to your child's education, not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but some of the issues that we're talking here. So you should be able to talk to the social worker, and she has to write reports about these issues as how they pertain to the family, and you should be able to get a copy of that of her report, which should include recommendations and suggestions for the team. So you should have it too. All right, let me move on now. Um, in addition to what we just looked at, the assessment process also mandates that the child has a physical examination conducted by your family doctor or doctor at the clinic that you go to, and he or she will prepare a report, and that report, the IEP, excuse me, the evaluation team should have a copy of. Okay, now there's something called a psychoeducational evaluation that I'll address in a moment. Now, the third bullet is observing the child in different classroom environments. Where does he sit? Uh, is he one to look around a lot and demonstrate curiosity? Is he talking? Is he very quiet? Is he engaging? Is he not engaging with the class? Is he understanding what the teacher is saying? We develop a lot of important information by observing the cloud in different environments. Okay, the social history is conducted by a school social worker, which consists typically of a series of interviews and questionnaires that the member of the that the social worker will ask the parent and the family. So at this point is when she will ask questions like, we'll ask mom, how was your pregnancy? Were there any issues? Were you taking medication or anything that may have had an impact on your pregnancy? Tell me about how what children do to play. How do they play by themselves? Do they like to play with people? Do they share? Do they not share? There's a lot of questions that she or he will ask to make determinations about to develop the social history of the child in order to get that information for the team. And it's really important that the parents understand that this is part of the evaluation process and offer correct and accurate information to the school social worker. And there are other assessments that are available for the child that are more specific than this. The child may have a visual impairment, so we need to do something about examining her, her or his visual issues and all that. Now, let me just talk quickly back to the second bullet about psychoeducational evaluation. Um, all right, that's coming up next slide. Sorry. These are just some other areas that parents can request evaluations in. As you can see, they're quite extensive. Psychological issues, development evaluation, speech and language skills, health, hearing, motor skills, cognitive skills, behavior that we'll address in more depth in a bit, and language and bilingual testing. Let me just speak about a few here. Cognitive skills refers to skills that your brain uses to think, read, learn, remember, reason, and pay attention. So if we're asking for these evaluations, it's because for this evaluation, it's because we have to understand how our child is learning or what are the issues that are preventing meaningful learning on his or her part based upon maybe a deficit in reading or remembering information or facts or paying attention. Uh, these are all components of learning that are on the bottom of the screen here. So we should be aware that you can request that the team evaluate every area that you're concerned with. It is your right to do that. IDEA says that I want to understand why my child um, does not like to eat out of a plate. I'm just making stuff up, along the way. But their parents have identified to members of our team many, many, many issues throughout the years that cause them to be concerned about how their child is learning in school. Another popular one is that boy has been doing just fine. The parents' family grows. There's a baby in the family now. and all of a sudden the baby's getting more attention than he or she is, and we might notice acting out behavior in the child. Behaviors come up that were not there prior to the birth of the new child. So we tell parents, basically that child is trying to engage your attention by acting out. Attention is something that every living being, needs. So when that boy or that girl lost center stage, so to speak, he or she will do things to get mom's or dad's attention, which include things like acting out or inappropriate behaviors. All right. Let me go talk a little bit more about these two important components of the assessment protocol. Once again, the social worker is collecting, providing information that include information on the child's developmental delays, health and psychological issues, behavior concerns that I just addressed momentarily, family and cultural factors that may contribute to the child's learning problems. The history may also provide information on the strengths, absolutely, your child may have. Now, developmental delays are issues that may occur during the mom's pregnancy, and the child was born and may have something that's not something about his neurological development or something with the brain that will definitely impair his or her ability to learn and function successfully in school. So we need to investigate all those things. We talked about some of the behavioral concerns that may be encountered. I mentioned cultural and family issues, especially if the family comes from a culture outside of New York City and the United States of America. Every family throughout the world has a different understanding of what reality is. We all assume that reality is the one that we're surrounded with, but that is not the case when you visit other countries or talk to other people and listen to their different understandings based upon what your understandings are. Now, quickly about the psychoeducational component, this part of the evaluation involves testing and observation of the child, usually in the classroom. It also measures different types of cognitive skills, reasoning, memory, and working efficiency that I mentioned in the previous slide, and also identifies areas of strength and weakness in the child's learning profile. The basic idea of a psychoed is to determine how the child is learning in terms of the testing and observation of the child in different environments, and to develop an understanding of how that child understands and processes information. Is the reason that he cannot speak correctly is because there's a hearing deficit that we need to investigate, or something about the way his mind, his brain processes information? He's listening to words and sentences. Maybe the hearing is perfectly normal, it's okay, but the way the brain and all the circuits in the brain understand and process that information is causing the difficulty. Because a question was asked, the child looked confused, not understanding what was meant by the question, and responds with an answer that has nothing to do with what the question is. So we need to not only check the hearing, but get information about how this student is processing and trying to understand information. And all along the way, you're asking questions. You could ask, what is a psychoeducational evaluation? Why is this important for my child to be tested and observed all over the place? Please ask many, many questions. Okay. Under IDEA, the school must notify parents and describe the evaluation procedures that will be employed to help determine if your child has a disability. And also, they must tell you that they will use a variety of tools. That means measures, tests, etc., to determine if the child has a disability, because IDEA says no single measure or test, if you like, can be used to make decisions. We need to understand this child from different points of views, from different perspectives. So that's why IDEA says in order to do that, we need to use tools, tests, etc., that examine your child from different points of views. So we get like a composite image. Composite means that we get information from different points of view or perspectives of your child's uh, way of learning and understanding. Um, the evaluation is conducted in the child's native language or mode of communication. So that means we have many children that come into this country, into our city, with either little or no English language skills and may have a disability, and it does not make sense to test that child in English because he or she is not going to understand what is asked of her, and may just result in more frustration and acting up behavior on the child's part. So the evaluation is conducted in the child's native language or mode of communication. That means the child may have a hearing disability and cannot hear what's being said. So we need to see how else we can get information. Does he or she understand or use any kind of sign language? That's the kind of information that we have to explore. And the evaluation is conducted in a form most likely to produce accurate information on what a child knows. Once again, how does this child understand things? How is he learning? Is he a visual learner? Is it what he sees that and draw him to learning, or is it hearing or kinetic? Do we have children that learn by using their body motion and all that? So the evaluation team is charged with making these determinations. IDEA also requires that all assessments be non-discriminatory and all procedures be non-biased. Once again, we cannot hold the fact that the child does not speak or understand the English language against him or her. We need to find out how to get that information in the most appropriate and effective way. So that means that the evaluation should be conducted by individuals that speak that child's language and, even better, understand that child's culture. That way, the information will be as accurate as possible. And as I said before, there must be a variety of assessment tools or tests and strategies performed in order to have an appropriate evaluation. So if mom brings in the child to have a test done at a clinic, and the child is not cooperating, is crying, is acting out, and the examiner not understanding that that child's never been into a clinic before and does not understand what this big person in this white robe is doing, may expect that child to act out, not because that's the nature of the behavior. It's because that child is kind of nervous or insecure of that particular environment that he or she is in. So we need to be aware of that. And on this page, finally, the evaluation is conducted by individuals who are licensed or certified to conduct evaluations. So you can make a request to see if you can ask around. Is everyone here licensed to conduct these evaluations? Yes, you can do that. IDEA says that you have a right to do that. The law says it's on your side. So do not feel like you can't say some things. If they're reasonable requests and questions, please ask them. They will help you understand this process a little better. Okay. All right. Let me talk about quickly about some other possible evaluations. Physical occupational therapy evaluation. That is generally done for students who may be demonstrating difficulties in activities like walking, hopping, holding pen, pencils, crayons, that may have physical or motor issues with these things with use of muscles or the nerves that are involved in moving different body parts. So we can conduct evaluations and testing to make those determinations. Then there are speech and language evaluations. Uh, Once again, you need to understand language is a two-way street. It has a part where I am talking now, and there's another part where you are listening. Uh, so at some point, the child may have an issue listening to what is being said, or have an issue in delivering information because of uh, some neurological issues. So we need to investigate those things too. Now, I want to talk really quickly about the third bullet. It's called a neuropsychological evaluation. Neuropsychological evaluations are very called uh, deep evaluations. They really go down deep to look at every conceivable factor that may be impacting your child's ability to learn in the classroom. They typically are done over a series of days, maybe 2, 3, 4 days, typically at a clinic or another site that's convenient for the parent and the clinician. And they are very, very, very accurate, very precise evaluations. Um, the issue is that there are also incredibly expensive evaluations. You can, when you have a moment, you could just Google that expression, neuropsychological evaluation, to get more information about what it does, what it covers, and some of the costs of these evaluations. They generally cost in the thousands of dollars. So we tell parents prepare to get resistance from the team, from the district, from the school regarding this. But once again, you have a right to request information that will help you make determinations about what services are necessary and appropriate for my daughter, my son to have in order for her to learn by going to school. Now, the next one, assistive technology evaluation. Assistive technology are tools, devices that are used to help a child improve their learning capacity in the classroom. A very basic example are the glasses that some of you may be wearing now. That is an example of very simple assistive technology. But what about students that have trouble understanding, reading, interpreting information? There's a lot of technology that's out there that you may want to raise your hand at the evaluation meeting and say, I understand that there's something called assistive technology that may help my child. Can you tell me what that is and how it can be applied to help my child? If you make that question and request that this take place, the team will contact an individual who's been specifically trained to conduct assistive technology evaluation. No one on that team will have the expertise to do that. They need to invite someone from the outside to conduct an assistive technology evaluation to determine if your child, what your child's needs are, and if he or she can benefit from AT. Psychiatric evaluations are used for children that may have emotional concerns or issues. We know of many students who suffer from a condition called agoraphobia. Agoraphobia means that that individual is deathly afraid of stepping out of their home environment. They cannot go outside because of the impact of this phobia. There's another one called school phobia. The child has no problem being at home or outside the street, but once he or she is in the school, in the classroom, all kinds of inappropriate behaviors may become apparent. So, excuse me, we can request evaluations on anything that concerns our children. Finally, we have vision or hearing exams, which are self-explanatory, but I want to talk a little bit about what's here is called central auditory processing. Pardon me. And definition of that is of central auditory processing is how your brain recognizes and interprets sounds. In other words, how does your brain receive, organize, and use auditory information or sounds? Once again, the child can hear perfectly. The teacher says, um, Martin, can you please tell me the name of your pet? And the student is looking at her, not understanding what he or she is trying to convey, but is definitely trying very hard to respond in a way that he hopes is correct. So he will say, "Today it's cloudy," as an attempt. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. It could be a language cultural issue, um, a neurological one, or something with central auditory processing. The job of the evaluation team is to make these determinations and to get accurate information to determine what services and supports the child will require. Okay, here's a good one. The FBA. As a classroom teacher, I remember these rather well. Basically, an FBA is a specific type of evaluation that is designed to investigate behavioral issues that that child is demonstrating. So an unfunctional behavioral assessment looks at why a child behaves as he or she is does, right? So we need to understand what is it about the behavior or about the child that's provoking the behavior, and what is happening in the environment that that child isn't that may be provoking the behavior. So at this point, we also look at information supplied by the school social worker in terms about what's going on at home and all that. There's a lot of things that could be impacting the child at home that he or she is bringing into the classroom and then acting out. Very common examples are domestic violence or child violence, uh, fights, drugs, alcohol. Too many of our children come to the classroom uh, just for a reason because it's a sanctuary. They will feel safe there. They will have a good meal to eat there. When they go home, it's not known what's going to happen, and that probably will have an impact upon their behavior in the classroom and at home. And the FBA, this is the second bullet, is a process that identifies specific target behaviors, um, the purpose of the behaviors, and what factors maintain the behavior that's interfering with the student's educational progress. So just to go back to the example of that there is a lot of violence in the family for whatever the reason, and the child feels scared, intimidated, and doesn't know what to do, and he's very angry. He doesn't know how to defend himself. He can't defend himself. Everyone's bigger than he is. But when he goes into the classroom, uh, he and his classmates are basically the same size. He may decide to exert some of that anger that he has built in on some of his classmates there, which is very common occurrence, and a very good example of determining what the behavior looks like that this child is displaying. We do investigations, we learn about the situation at home, and then we could design strategies to meet that situation. Uh, all right, so the bottom uh, the bottom bullet has something called CSE. That stands for Committee on Special Education. Every school in New York City and most other cities have a committee of special education, and they are the ones that are asked to conduct the FBA here. And now there's another phrase here that you may not have seen. I'll try to explain it briefly. Um, Manifestation determination. The CSE must conduct a functional behavior assessment whenever there is a manifestation determination review. Very basically, what they are trying to do is they're trying to determine whether that behavior was was caused by the disability or by other issues. Maybe for whatever reason that this student is being a bully. He just likes to bully people, and there's nothing about his native behavior that's causing it. So the MDR is important for you to ask about, is because the point is, if we determine that the behavior was impacted or influenced, that the behavior was impacted or influenced by the child's disability, we need to act to it in a different manner. We tell parents that if the team determines that the behavior was not influenced by a disability, that student will be able to enjoy the consequences that any other student in the school will have, will engage based upon the behavior. But if we determine that the behavior was definitely impacted or influenced by the child's disability, we treat it differently. We look at other ways to support the child, uh, counseling, things like that that may be necessary to support the child. So the MDR, the manifestation determination review, looks at the relationship between the child's disability and the behavior that he or she is demonstrating. Um, that's another good thing for parents to ask about at meetings if behavior is an issue. And you hear, say, I heard about this MDR. Please tell me more about that. And is it something that we should engage or consider for my child? Here is one answer for that. According to IDEA, if the student exhibits behavior that interferes with his or her learning or the learning of other students in the classroom, the FBA must be conducted. So if that behavior is acting out, fighting, cursing, running around the room, screaming, leaving the room, these are definitely issues that will not let that particular child learn or his classmates learn. So according to IDEA, a functional behavior assessment must be conducted. Uh, so one thing, once again, the FBA looks at all the evidence, all the documentation, and then they provide a report that should offer reasons for the problem behavior. So maybe part of the report says because of Johnny's home life and the active physical violence there, he's very scared, he's very insecure, comes into the classroom and takes out his insecurities and other issues on his classmates. It can look something like that. So another thing that results out of the FBA, the Functional Behavior Assessment, is what we call BIP. After the FBA has been conducted and the reports and recommendations have been written, the major one will be something called a behavior improvement plan, which should be a series of strategies that are employed by the students' teachers in the classroom. And also, importantly, should be shared and employed at the child's home if possible. So what a behavior improvement seeks to do is try to address the targeted behaviors and either eliminate them or reduce their incidence to so it's not so it's so bad. So once again, it's a series of strategies that the teacher uses to try to modify or improve the target behavior. An important part of this BIP is the progress reports that are generated as a result of the behavior improvement plan. Please make sure that you have both an understanding and a copy of progress reports. You need to understand if these strategies are effective and if they're supporting your child or not. If they're effective, you should be able to see some changes, positive changes in the child's behavior. And if that's the case, then you could communicate with the schools and say, yes, it's working. He's not acting out as often, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you do not see any positive changes, with the student's behavior. You call up the school, say, I have not seen any changes on the behavior. I don't think the behavior plan is working right. What should be our next step? This is an example of effective advocacy on the parent's part, when she is very there, very up close, very personal, expressing concerns about her son's or daughter's education. In this case, we're talking about behavior issues, but it applies across the board in all aspects of the child's education. So uh, parents should understand FBA, Functional Behavior Assessment, BIP, Behavior Improvement Plan, and some of the other acronyms that I've been mentioning throughout the presentation. If you don't understand, please raise your hand. Send the teacher or the school psychologist an email. You should know that in New York City, every person that works in the DOE has been provided with a business email that you should inquire about. You should be able to ask the art teacher, your child's language teacher, the math teacher, may I have your email address so we can keep in contact and I can share some information about my child, et cetera, et cetera. That would be a good way to maintain communication with the personnel that interact with your child on a daily basis. All right, so a little bit more about FBAs. I know we're doing a lot of alphabet work here. I addressed just the first three letters of the alphabet here for this slide, ABCs of the FBA. So as everything else, every letter stands for a word, and the letter A stands for antecedents. And that basically means what was happening before the student exhibited the problem behavior, before the student uh, uh, did the tantrum, before he or she screamed and left the chair. What happened right before that here? So in quotes I have here, for example, was a student teased or provoked by another classmate? Yeah, sometimes someone can be teasing or bothering a student while the teacher's attention is distracted by something else, writing on the board or and not really focusing on what's going on. And at one point, that student gets tired of being teased and provoked and lashes out at the person who's bothering him by yelling, cursing, or even maybe striking him. And that's what the teacher will become aware of because everyone's making a commotion now. He or she may not have been aware that student could have been teased or provoked by an instigator. So we had to do this investigation to collect this information. Now, the B is simple. It's a behavior. The team has to describe the specific behaviors that the student manifested, that he or she showed. They must be clear, detailed, and described carefully. Description should express facts, not opinions. Okay, so we also tell people not to use subjective language like words like crazy, lazy, disrespectful, things like that. Those words are subjective. They're offering an opinion, not a fact. So when you are looking at FBAs and all that, and you see language like the examples that I use, please bring it to bring it up to the team's attention. You say, wait a minute, how can I be sure that this report is accurate if I see such subjective language in this report? Yes, you can do things like that because you are there to make sure that your child has necessary and appropriate services and all his needs, all her needs are met, whether they're behavioral, educational, etc., etc. Finally, the C stands for consequences. What happened as a result of the problem behavior? What did the teacher do? Well, when he heard the commotion, he turned around and saw the student who was being teased or bullied react. He probably did not see the bully but still, this is what we report on. What did he do? Did he send the student to the dean's office, call for the dean, remove him from the classroom? What was his reaction? And how did the students react? Were they going, no, he wasn't the one, teacher? or were they laughing or having some? How was the response of the class to this behavioral incident? Let me. We're almost done here. All right. This is called IEE, which stands for Independent Educational Evaluation. Basically, what this is, that as I said, you have a right to request a free evaluation from the school system. The evaluation is done. You get the report of the evaluation's outcomes and summaries in your language. That means you can get it in in many of the languages that are spoken in the classrooms in the city. Includes Spanish, of course, uh, Mandarin, Urdu, Russian, and a bunch of other of service languages that are spoken here. You can request that these documents be translated into a language that you can read and understand. That's your right. Okay. So IEE is defined as an evaluation conducted by a qualified examiner who is not employed by the school. That's what public agency means. Responsible for the education of the child. So once you request for an independent educational evaluation in writing, in New York City, parents will be given a list of other sites, other places that test students. They will call them. Once again, no one there should work for the DOE or have any connection with the school at all. It has to be an independent evaluation that we are looking at. So we call, an appointment is made, the evaluation is done, and then that information is taken back to for the rest of the team to process, to read. Okay. Another thing about the evaluation that I share with parents is that when you request this evaluation and it's done, parents have also told me, can I also bring in my own evaluation, like from a private evaluation? I said, sure you can. You can bring in any information that offers, any evaluation that offers information about your child's needs, how they learn, et cetera, and introduce it to the evaluation team. They can review the evaluation, but they are not required to follow the recommendations that the evaluation made. They'll look at the information that you bring in, but they don't have to abide by its findings. That's the way that works, okay? So we should also know on this screen now, this evaluation, this independent evaluation, is not limited to only evaluating a child's academic or cognitive skills, but may also include the evaluation of any skill related to the child's educational needs, okay? So that could be like the function that I mentioned, behavior. Even music therapy are a few examples of the types of IEEs covered under the law IDEA. Parents may obtain
Your mic is breaking up, Godfrey. Godfrey, we can't hear you properly.
the last bullet here. If the school does not want to pay for the IEE, it may request an impartial hearing to show its evaluation is appropriate. That means that the school, the examination, the evaluation team has decided to abide and hold their evaluation and the report as the one that will be used to make determinations about your child's needs. You may not agree with that. You may want to insist on an outside evaluation. So you may, usually it is the parent that requests an impartial hearing, but as you can see here, the school district can also request that. An impartial hearing is basically a hearing that takes place in front of a judge known as an impartial hearing officer to make a determination about this case here, if the school's evaluation was sufficient enough to be used to make judgments about the child's needs and services. He or she will listen to arguments from both the school and the parent and make a determination. Basically, that's the role of a judge in a standard courtroom in this country. He listens to arguments, reads testimony, witnesses are also interviewed to make a determination about issues like this. Uh, Impartial hearings are usually used in for parents to who have an issue that their child has not received according to IDA, a free, appropriate public education or FAPE. We'll talk more about that at a future webinar. All right, here's something important: triennial evaluations. Every 3 years, IDEA states that the child should be evaluated as if it was the first evaluation, unless the parent and the school district agree in writing that the reevaluation is not necessary. We always tell parents to make sure that they request the triennial evaluation. Okay? Uh, and here are some of the reasons that are listed. We need to understand and learn and know that one of the reasons for the triennial is to determine if the child continues to be a student with a disability according to IDEA. Uh, Sometimes there are situations where a student, because he or she has received really good resources and support through the school system, many of the effects of the disability have been really radically reduced or mitigated. So they're no longer an issue in the child's education. So at that point, the team, including the parent, has to make a decision whether they want to continue receiving or getting educational specialized services for a child or not. Okay. So also the evaluation, the triennial, is designed to determine the child's educational needs. All right. Let me just say something quickly about that. Um, uh, Other reasons for the triennial is to see if your child has been progressing based upon the goals that are in his or her IEP. Um, Once again, the IEP is a very important document. The critical component are the goals that are written for the child, for the student, and basically, a goal is an educational expectation held by the IEP team in this case that this child will be able to accomplish what the goal specifies, usually within the school year. There's a lot of information there, but it's important for you to realize that goals are basically designed to measure the level of progress of your child. Hopefully, that level of progress is growing up. You see that little arch of that line? It should be going up, indicating that your child is benefiting from the goals, is benefiting from the resources and services, and benefiting from the education he or she is getting. So, triennial evaluations are a good way to determine the level or the progress level that the child is making. And finally, I tell parents that your child, that 8-year-old girl who is cute and tells you "I love you" 70 times a day and grabs at your pants or your skirt or apron, whatever, and says "I love you, mommy." As she grows older, she will start going into that phase of life called adolescence. Uh, I'm sure if you have teenagers in your family, you probably know what I'm about to say. Yeah, children, due to this natural process, will change. You will see changes in many aspects of their life, the way they act, the way they dress, the way they look, the way they behave. Understand that is pretty much a part of the natural process uh, that every human being goes through as they go through life. The issue that I draw to parents' attention is that you need to understand what is the impact of this growing adolescence, especially with all the hormonal changes, that brings along with it, and how do these changes of hormones, etc., and the child's disability interact? Um, that's a really good question for you to ask the IPT. My child is already giving me a hard time. Never been a good one to pay attention to what I say, and now that he is 9, 10, or 11, he's really giving me a hard time, ignoring me, telling me to stay out of his face or whatever. And so not only do you have to deal with the impact of the disability, but you have to deal with the impact of the adolescence. And you can request services and assistance from the school to try to meet some of these changes and et cetera, et cetera. Let me move on now. All right, fine, almost finally, we're almost done here. Here's some of the role that you will take in terms of this process. You have an important role in this process, in the evaluation process, because as I said in the beginning, you know your child better than anyone else in that team. You really, really do. You have much information that you should share with them in order to make sure that he or she gets necessary and appropriate services. Also, the parent can provide information about particular things that he or she observes the child do. The way he or she eats. Maybe he or likes to put a food item on the left side of the plate, the carrots, and something else on the right side of the plate. And every time that he eats, he divides the plate into different areas where special food is if he does not want to change the order of that food. That's typically something that may be that you may notice for a child who's on the autism spectrum. By the way, remember that you know your child better than anyone else who's evaluating him or her. And also, parents who come from different countries and cultures can share particular cultural, linguistic, and traditional practices that may influence the outcome of the evaluation. Yeah, these are some of the very important roles that parents have to do. And a little bit of advice: ask questions. Always, always, always ask questions, please, and challenge assumptions. Um, find out why the school psychologist made that determination. Ask him for that. Ask for documentation. Ask for data. When you hear from teachers and related service providers that your child is showing wonderful progress, your next comment should be, please show me the data, show me the report. I'm not really sure that I see this progress at home. So can you tell me how you are determining that my son is making progress in these areas? Ask for the data. Ask questions, please. Ask for the evaluation in all areas where you suspect your child is having trouble or problems. Express all of your concerns. The law says you can do that, please. Understand the definition of any proposed classification category and make sure that the classification best fits the needs of your child. That means, as I said initially, that the evaluation team must pick at least one of the 13 disability categories recognized by also the Office of Special Education Programs in Washington, D.C., and that you should have an understanding of what that classification means. Once again, parents must have a real good understanding of that disability. Why are you saying that my child has autism or learning disability or whatever? Please show me the facts, the documents, the data. Make sure that you have an understanding that that disability category, which is designed to provide specific resources, placements, assistance for your child, and the wrong disability category is necessary for a child, he or she may not get resources that will be helpful. In fact, he or she may then encounter more issues and all that. And basically, let me just show you. All right, let me just go up to here. Here are the 13 special education categories that the federal government, the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., identifies and acknowledges as being disabilities. autism spectrum disorder, ASD, deafness, deaf blindness, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, learning disability, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairments, other health impairment, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairments. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to give you a brief definition of these, but you can easily find out what they mean by just doing a very quick Google search on your computer, laptop, or tablet when you have a moment. But according to IDEA, the the team, the IEP team, must identify at least one of these categories before the child can start to receive services, um, education, resources that are designed to help support him or her who has that particular disability. All right, very quickly, I know I'm running a little over time, but this came up last week. If you're a child, if you're a parent of a preschool age child, you should be aware of this information that's on these last two slides here. Basically, the New York State Education Department recently issued some guidance which shows that evaluations and reevaluations, including bilingual evaluations, do not require face-to-face assessments or observations may take place while schools are closed if you, the parent, give your consent. Now, once again, this is just designed for preschool age children. That is children age 3 to 5, all right, who may be receiving services that due to the COVID-19 virus are not able to get face-to-face assistance or treatments now, but they may be able to get treatments or services that don't require face-to-face encounter. Uh, so, if an evaluation of a student with a disability requires a face-to-face assessment or observation, the evaluation will need to be delayed until school reopens, and the Committee of Preschool Education must notify the family that the service will start all over again. Okay, let me just read the last slide here. With the consent of parents, the CPSEs are provided with the most recent evaluation reports for a child in transition from early intervention, and it's headed for preschool and also for kindergarten. And the CPSEs will also review progress reports and input from parents to determine a student's needs whenever possible. As with any evaluation, the CPSE must determine whether sufficient information exists or whether further information is required for determination of special education services eligibility and any recommendation for programs and services, including assessments conducted via telepractice / distance learning. As you know, due to the virus, our schools are closed, and children with disabilities may not be able to receive the services that are indicated on their IEP, particularly if they involve having a resource provider uh, physically deliver that service. They can no longer do that due to the situation with the virus. However, some other therapies or resources may be available and provided via what they call here telepractice. The Department of Education in New York City is developing a variety of techniques and strategies and technologies to make some of these services available excuse me, to students at home. So please inquire of your school. Most of you should have received a communication from the school principal about the situation, and hopefully there'll be a phone number or an email address that you can use to ask questions about these issues, particularly if your son, if your daughter has not been receiving many of the services indicated on his or her IEP. Under the law, the school still must provide services indicated in your child's IEP, even throughout this crisis. So I think that would be it for now. On the last page, I've indicated some resources that you're welcome to refer to learn more about these things. And also, um, oh yeah, I can welcome your questions or comments now if you have any. If you've written them down on the chart place, Doris has received them, and hopefully, if there are any questions, she'll be able to read them to me now. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you benefited from the webinar. Please, at the end, can you click on the link which it will take you to a place that you can do a quick webinar summary survey? I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Doris, any questions or comments?
Well, we only have two. One of them I answered to
Great.
everybody. Will this presentation be available to us today? And I said it will be available on our YouTube channel on Friday. The next question was, will we be receiving a certificate for this webinar?
Oh yeah. Okay. Thanks. First of all, thanks for providing the information to the first question, Doris. Appreciate that.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a common thing. What we're not offering certificates. I think the best we can do is we can send you or your supervisor acknowledgement that you attended this webinar. When you registered for the webinar, that information was saved in the webinar system. So all we need to do is retrieve that information. It will have the name of the webinar, the date, and the time, and hopefully that will be helpful of you. But unfortunately, we're not able to supply any people who registered for the webinar or participated with a certificate. Thank you.
Okay, Godfrey. So there's two more questions that came in, and they'll be the last ones. One of them
Go
is like
ahead.
a cluster. It was like a cluster of questions. So it was, what happens if a student is out of school and needs an evaluation? What is the process to obtain an evaluation?
uh, that parent should go to the school nearest by to where he or she lives and consult with parent coordinator there. He or she will be able to start the process that the parent is inquiring about. Um, you probably will need to bring in some documentation about the child, age, um, um, a record of the immunizations and all that stuff. But besides that, he or she should be able to obtain an evaluation free of charge to determine if the child has a disability and what his or her needs are. Thank you.
The other one, what if a student is out of school and had an IP, but needs it to participate in out of school programs, college, etc.
College? All right. Well, we tell parents that under IDEA, your child has a right to obtain a free, appropriate public education from age 3, when he or she starts preschool, until the age of 21. At when he or she achieves the age of 21, IDEA and all those provisions end. Many parents ask me what they have to do to continue the IEP if their child is going to college, whether it's a community college or a 4-year college. I said it doesn't happen because once the child graduates or exits high school, that program, that support terminates. But there are many other resources available to parents who have children who are either going to college or intend to go to college, and that is one of the things that parents need to bring up. For parents, who have kids in the system at the IEP meeting. But it is quite possible to obtain services to support a child when they are attending a community college or a 4-year institution. One of the things that we tell parents is identify schools that have offices or programs that are there to support individuals with disabilities in terms of giving them tutoring, extra time, and other services designed to support individuals that are attending college who have disabilities. Thank you.
And Godfrey, finally, there's no more questions, but if you could briefly just show the last two slides regarding CPSE.
Sure. Okay, okay, here's the first one. I'll leave it out for a minute. As Doris said, this presentation will be available uh, shortly. Um, where did you say it's going to be available, Doris?
It's gonna be in our YouTube channel. Ms. Milka informed me that it will be available on Friday.
All right, great. Right. Yeah. Yeah, once again, this information applies only to parents of preschool age children. Okay, one more minute. I'll go to the next and last slide.
You could change the slide.
Okay. By the way, the word on the bottom, telepractice, is a technique used by uh, uh, resource providers who are speech and language therapists. They use this service a lot to work with their clients at school. But now it's going to be expanded much more. Now they're calling it distance education to provide education and services to children via computers, tablets, etc. So hopefully they'll be able to get some of the services that are on their child's IEPs via this technology. Also, you can also contact your school. There are people there now, including the principal and other individuals who may have information that you may benefit from. So please take advantage. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Rivera, and this concludes our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for your assistance as usual, Doris. I appreciate it. Goodbye.
Bye.